I thought my husband's business trips were just work, until I discovered the truth that shattered our marriage.
Disclaimer. The stories on Story Spill are inspired by real events, but some details, names, and identifying information have been changed to protect the privacy of the people involved. While we strive to keep the essence of the events true, certain parts may be dramatized or adapted to make the storytelling more engaging and entertaining for our viewers. All content is intended for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Our goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of September, and your support will help us bring even more amazing stories to you. You know that weird tiny moment? So let's start the story, where something feels off.
Like, you can't even explain it, but there's a little shift in the air that your brain can't let go of. That's where this all began. It was a Tuesday night in early March. Ethan, my husband, was standing in front of our closet, suitcase open on the bed, methodically folding shirts into those perfect little squares only he can manage. The hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound in the room, and I sat cross-legged on the edge of the mattress, sipping lukewarm tea, watching him in that casual, absent-minded way wives do after years of marriage. I've seen him pack 100 times. Business trips are nothing new for us. Ethan works in corporate consulting, which basically means he travels all over the place to help companies optimize things. I never understood exactly what supply chains, budgets, buzzwords, but it pays well, so I didn't ask too many questions. But that night, I noticed things I'd never noticed before. The cologne. It wasn't his usual warm, woodsy scent, the one I bought him for our anniversary last year. This one was sharper, newer. I only realized it because he sprayed it into the air and walked through the mist like he was in a commercial. Ethan never does that. And the shirts. He usually packs his standard work uniform, pale blue or white dress shirts, sometimes a light gray. This time, I saw a dark burgundy one I'd never seen before, and a soft black polo that still had the creases from being folded in a store. Then there was the grooming. He'd gotten a fresh haircut that morning, which wasn't unusual, but he'd also shaved his beard down to just stubble. I liked his beard. He knew that. So why change it before a trip? None of this was exactly suspicious on its own, but together, my gut filed it away as strange. We've been together for 7 years, married for 4. Our relationship had its ups and downs, whose doesn't? But we were solid. At least as far as I knew. The first few years were everything you hope for in a marriage: late night takeout dinners, weekend getaways, stupid inside jokes that make no sense to anyone else. We talked about everything back then: work stress, dream vacations, which celebrity we'd hypothetically cheat with. Mine was Chris Hemsworth, his was Natalie Portman, and I rolled my eyes so hard at that one. But lately, I don't know, we'd been more like comfortable roommates than passionate lovers. Not in a bad way, just settled. He'd be gone for days at a time and I'd fill the space with my work. I'm a freelance graphic designer, or wine nights with my best friend Mia. I missed him when he was gone, but I'd gotten used to the quiet. So maybe that's why I didn't immediately jump to he's cheating. I mean, come on, this is Ethan. The man who used to bring me flowers just because. The guy who learned how to make my favorite pasta from scratch during lockdown because I missed the restaurant version. But here's the thing about red flags. They don't usually show up waving in your face. They start small, almost invisible. The first one, late night work calls. At first, I thought nothing of it. His job involves international clients, so a call at 10:30 p.m. wasn't crazy. But it became a pattern, him stepping into the kitchen or out on the balcony, lowering his voice. Then came the muted notifications. Ethan used to leave his phone face up on the counter while we cooked dinner together. Now, it was always face down and he'd scoop it up the second it buzzed. He also started locking it with a password. Before, it was just a swipe open thing because, we trusted each other. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this is what happens in long-term relationships. People get more private. Not necessarily because they're hiding something, but because the magic of constant openness fades. Still, it gnawed at me. The night before this trip, he was extra affectionate. Not in a I want something way, but in a nostalgic way. He made dinner salmon and roasted vegetables, poured me a glass of my favorite wine, and asked about my latest project. He even offered to rub my shoulders while we watched TV. Part of me melted, part of me wondered if it was guilt. Fast forward to that Tuesday night. He zipped up his suitcase and double-checked his phone charger, laptop, and conference badge, a little lanyard with his name on it for whatever event he was supposedly attending. He placed it on the dresser while he went to grab a jacket from the coat closet. That's when it happened. He came back, kissed me on the forehead, and said, "Okay, I'm all set. Love you. I'll text you when I land tomorrow." I smiled, said, "Love you too," and watched him carry his suitcase downstairs to put it by the door. But about an hour later, when I went to close up the bedroom for the night, I saw the conference badge sitting exactly where he left it. Oh, I thought, he's going to need that. I grabbed it and decided to slip it into the front pocket of his suitcase so he wouldn't forget. He'd be leaving at dawn and I didn't want him scrambling. I unzipped the suitcase, pushed aside a neatly folded shirt, and froze. There was no front pocket, no conference badge. Instead, tucked into the side compartment was a printed confirmation for a luxury hotel reservation in a city he'd never mentioned. Not the city he told me he was traveling to. not even the same state. And that was the moment I felt it, the sharp, unmistakable crack in the perfect illusion of my marriage. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow of the street lamp outside stretching across the room like a spotlight on my thoughts. My mind kept circling back to that hotel confirmation. The bold black letters spelling out a city name that had nothing to do with where Ethan said he was going. First came the rationalizations. Maybe it was a last-minute client change. Maybe he didn't want to bother explaining the switch to me because it was boring work stuff. Maybe there was some totally innocent reason for booking a luxury hotel instead of the mid-range conference ones his company usually covered. The problem was, I couldn't make the puzzle pieces fit. And every time I tried, another image popped into my head. Ethan smiling at someone else, Ethan lying to my face, Ethan becoming a stranger I didn't recognize. By morning, I had convinced myself I was overthinking. I got up early, made coffee, and left his conference badge on the kitchen counter next to a sticky note that read, "Forgot this, love you." He grabbed it on his way out, kissed my cheek, and was gone before sunrise. But I couldn't shake it. The unease followed me around like a shadow. By noon, I decided to do something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I called his office. "Hi, this is Sarah, Ethan's wife," I said, trying to sound casual. "I just wanted to double check when he's supposed to be back from this trip. We might have a family thing to schedule." The secretary, a cheerful woman named Linda, who I'd met at the holiday party once, didn't hesitate. "Oh, Ethan, he's actually off this week. No client meeting scheduled? Lucky him, huh?" Her voice was so light, so matter-of-fact, that it took a second for her words to register. "Oh, right, yes. Lucky him," I said, my voice tight. "Thanks, Linda." I hung up before she could hear the way my heart was pounding. The thing about lies is that once you catch one, your brain starts rewinding every conversation, every excuse, every little moment that didn't quite add up. That night, I sat on the couch with my laptop, replaying our recent interactions in my head. The late night calls, the muted notifications, the change in cologne, the shirts I'd never seen before. A voice in my head kept whispering, "He's cheating." Another voice, quieter but stubborn, kept pushing back, "You don't know that. Don't ruin your marriage over paranoia." And so began the war between wanting to confront him and wanting undeniable proof. Over the next week, I started running subtle tests. When he called from his next trip, I'd casually ask, "So, how's the weather there?" Or, "What's the hotel like?" I'd make mental notes of every detail he gave me. I started checking our shared credit card statement more often, telling myself it was for budgeting purposes. One night, I saw charges from a fancy Italian restaurant in a city he wasn't supposed to be in. I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers numb. That restaurant wasn't just pricey, it was romantic. It was the kind of place you took someone you wanted to impress. I finally broke and told Mia. Mia has been my best friend since college, the kind of friend who will both hold your hair back while you puke and also roast you for drinking too much in the first place. We met for brunch and I spilled everything: the hotel booking, the call with his secretary, the restaurant charge. Her reaction was immediate. "Sarah, he's hiding something. And I don't mean he's secretly planning you a surprise trip. This is bad." "I can't just accuse him without proof," I said, stirring my coffee even though I'd already put too much cream in it. "Then get proof," she said simply. "If it's nothing, great. If it's something, better to know now." Her words stuck with me. That night, I sat at my desk staring at the hotel name from the confirmation I'd found. My hands were shaking as I opened a new browser tab and created a fake email account. Something generic like katie.johnson84. I typed, "Hello, my husband has a booking at your hotel next week, and I just wanted to confirm the details. Could you please let me know the check-in date and whether the reservation includes 1 or 2 guests? Thank you, Katie." I hit send before I could chicken out. 2 days later, a polite reply landed in my inbox. "Dear Miss Johnson, thank you for your inquiry. Mr. Ethan Miller is scheduled to check in on Thursday at 3 p.m. The reservation is indeed for 2 guests staying in our executive king suite. Warm regards, reservation desk." I read it 3 times, my stomach sinking lower each time. 2 guests, executive king suite. The truth wasn't fully out yet, but it was close enough to burn. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling again, only this time. It wasn't confusion I felt, it was resolve. If he was hiding something, I was going to find out exactly what. Once I had that email from the hotel confirming his 2 guest reservation, something inside me shifted. The old me, the trusting, forgiving, benefit of the doubt wife, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't even recognize yet. Someone who was done playing the passive role in her own marriage. If Ethan was going to have another life, I was going to see it with my own eyes. When he mentioned another business trip a week later, I didn't blink. I smiled, asked the usual questions about where he was headed, and nodded when he said he'd be gone for 4 days. He claimed it was a quick client meet and greet in Chicago. The exact same city from the luxury hotel booking. "Sounds nice," I said, pretending to focus on chopping vegetables for dinner. Inside, I was already planning. The next morning, I texted my old college friend Lily, who lived nowhere near Chicago, and asked if she could cover for me if Ethan ever asked where I was. I told her it was for something important, and because Lily is the ride or die type, she didn't ask questions. Then I booked my own flight. Not the same one as Ethan's. I couldn't risk running into him at the gate, but one leaving an hour later, landing at the same airport. I booked a hotel 2 blocks from his. Nothing fancy, just close enough for me to move around without drawing attention. I packed light, all in a carry-on, jeans, a couple of plain sweaters, a baseball cap, and sneakers. No makeup. I wanted to blend in. The morning of his trip, I kissed him goodbye in the driveway like I always do, waving as he drove off to the airport. Then I went back inside, double-checked my bag, and called an Uber to take me to my own flight. By the time I landed in Chicago, my heart was hammering so hard it felt like everyone around me could hear it. I grabbed my phone, checked the hotel confirmation again, and made my way toward the rideshare pickup zone. I got to the luxury hotel about 15 minutes before check-in time. The lobby was everything you'd expect. Marble floors, gold accents, a chandelier that looked like it could crush a small car. I tucked myself into a corner near a fake plant, baseball cap pulled low, pretending to scroll through my phone. And then I saw him. Ethan walked in, rolling his suitcase, looking completely at ease. He went to the front desk, smiled at the clerk, handed over his ID, and in less than 2 minutes, he had his key card in hand. But instead of heading straight to the elevators, he stopped. Because she walked in, the woman. I didn't know her name yet, but I'll never forget the way she looked. Tall, wavy brunette hair that caught the lobby light, a fitted camel coat, black boots that clicked against the marble. She smiled when she saw him, and it wasn't just polite. It was warm, familiar. They hugged. Not a quick, polite hug, a long, chest-to-chest, I've missed you hug. Then she slipped her arm through his, and they walked toward the elevators, laughing at something he said. I could feel my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. I snapped a few photos, nothing obvious, just quick shots from the side. My palms were sweaty, and I had to wipe them on my jeans before I could even check if the pictures were clear. They were too clear. In one, Ethan was looking at her, the way he used to look at me, soft, almost protective. In another, she was leaning into him like she belonged there. I followed them out of the lobby and into the hotel bar. They sat in a corner booth, ordered drinks, and continued their easy, intimate conversation. I couldn't hear every word from where I sat, but I didn't need to. At one point, she reached across the table and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. He smiled. And then I heard it. She called him E. I'd never heard anyone call him that before. I stayed until they left the bar together, heading toward the elevators again. I didn't follow them upstairs. I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, my chest tight. I stumbled back into the cold Chicago air and walked to my own hotel, my mind buzzing with questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Was I the side piece and she the main one? Back in my room, I sat on the bed, staring at the photos I'd taken. Every instinct screamed at me to confront him right then, to march into his hotel room and throw the evidence in his face. But something in me said, not yet. If I confronted him now, he'd have excuses, lies, half-truths. I needed the whole picture. That night, unable to sleep, I went back to his hotel and lingered near the lobby just before midnight. And that's when I heard it, his voice low and warm as he walked with her toward the exit for what I assumed was a late-night stroll. I can't wait until this is official, he said. I don't know what, she replied. My ears were ringing too loudly, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever life he was planning, I wasn't a part of it. After I heard him say those words, I can't wait until this is official, my world didn't just tilt, it cracked straight down the middle. I walked back to my hotel like a zombie. I barely remember the streets or the cold Chicago air biting at my cheeks. All I could hear was his voice in my head, over and over again, like a scratch record. I didn't cry. Not yet. That would come later in ugly, heaving sobs that left my eyes swollen for days. But that night, I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet, phone clutched in my hand. My brain had switched from hurt to strategy. Because I knew one thing. I couldn't just accuse him with what I had. I needed more than blurry photos and overheard whispers. I needed facts, proof, ammunition. That's how I ended up Googling private investigators near me at 2 a.m. By 9 the next morning, I was sitting in a small office 2 miles from my hotel, across from a man named Greg. He was in his 50s, with a calm, no-nonsense demeanor and the kind of face that looked like it had seen everything. I told him the short version. My husband, the hotel, the other woman, and the suspicion that there was a lot more under the surface. Greg didn't blink. If you want to know the truth, I can find it, he said. But I'll warn you, you might not like what you hear. I laughed. A bitter sound that didn't even feel like it belonged to me. I'm pretty sure I already don't like what I've heard. Greg got to work immediately. I gave him Ethan's full name, work details, and the dates of his trips. I forwarded the hotel confirmation and the photos I'd taken. Then I went home, back to the city where Ethan and I lived together, though now, calling it home felt like a joke. For a week, I went through the motions. I answered emails, cooked dinner, smiled when Ethan called to check in like nothing was wrong. I hated myself for playing along, but I needed to keep him oblivious. Every night, I'd check my phone for an update from Greg. And then, one Thursday afternoon, I got the call. I've got something for you, Greg said. His voice was serious, almost heavy. We met at a small diner on the edge of town. Greg slid into the booth across from me and opened a manila folder. This isn't just an affair, he said. It's a second life. The photos were the first punch to the gut. Ethan and the woman, her name was Rachel, walking hand in hand through a farmer's market, having brunch at a sunny cafe, moving into a small apartment together in the city where I'd followed him. The documents were the second punch. Greg had traced a joint bank account under both their names. He had photos of Ethan's car parked outside the apartment overnight, multiple nights in a row. And the third punch, the one that knocked the wind out of me, was the family connection. He's introduced her to his parents, Greg said. Told her you're his soon-to-be ex-wife who's making the divorce process difficult. I stared at him, my mouth dry. His parents? My in-laws? Greg nodded. They've had dinner together. Multiple times. It felt like my skin didn't fit right anymore. Like my entire marriage had been an elaborate set piece, and I'd been the clueless extra. I'd spent years bending over backward to be a good wife supporting his career, picking up the slack when he traveled, trusting him without question, and meanwhile, he'd been building a shiny new life with someone else. The rage came slowly at first, curling up from my stomach like smoke. By the time I was driving home, it was wildfire. If he thought I was just going to leave quietly, let him have his new life without consequences, he had another thing coming. The next few weeks were calculated. I played my role perfectly, the supportive, unsuspecting wife. I laughed at his jokes over dinner. I asked about his work trips. I even kissed him goodbye at the door. But behind the scenes, I was documenting everything. Every credit card statement, every work email that didn't match his travel story, every suspicious calendar entry on his laptop when he forgot to close the screen. I backed up texts from his phone when he left it unattended for a few minutes, forwarding them to my own email. Screenshots of his goodnight messages to Rachel, the pet names, the I love yous. I started building a timeline, dates, locations, proof of lies. I even printed copies of everything in case he tried to wipe devices later. The thing was, I didn't just want to leave him. I wanted to make sure that when I walked away, he'd be standing in the wreckage of the life he tried to build on top of me. One night, while he was working late, I opened the drawer where he kept his passport. Inside was a small key I didn't recognize. I took a photo of it, then put it back exactly as I found it. Another breadcrumb. And every time I thought about the apartment, the bank account, and my in-laws, smiling across the table at Rachel like she was family, the fire in my chest burned hotter. By the time I closed my laptop one night, the evidence pile was thick enough to crush him in court if I wanted to. I sat back in my chair, staring at the folder on my desk. If he wanted 2 lives, I was going to make sure both came crashing down at once. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that patience is the deadliest weapon. People think revenge is about screaming in someone's face, throwing their clothes on the lawn, or making a dramatic exit. But that's messy. That's sloppy. I didn't want messy. I wanted Ethan to feel his life rot from the inside out, one careful thread at a time until the entire fabric collapsed around him. And that's exactly what I did. It started with a burner email account. No name, no trace. I used a VPN, encrypted everything. I wasn't about to tip him off by being careless. The first thing I sent was delicate. Just a couple of photos, Ethan and me at our house, our actual home. They weren't intimate in the sense of bedroom photos, but they were undeniably personal. Him in sweatpants making breakfast, us holding hands at the farmer's market, him grinning on our porch while holding a cup of coffee in the mug my sister gave me. I didn't add context, didn't need to. I just wrote, "You deserve to know who you're engaged to," and attached one more thing, a PDF copy of our marriage license. I imagined her sitting there, staring at her screen, feeling her stomach drop the same way mine had in that hotel room weeks ago. I pictured her rehearsing all the things she'd say to him. I pictured Ethan's face when she did. I didn't stop there. A few days later, another email. This one wasn't just proof of marriage, it was our joint mortgage. Our names side by side on the deed to the house he never mentioned. The message this time was simpler. Ask him about this. No threats, no accusations. Just undeniable, cold proof. I knew she'd confront him, and I knew he'd try to lie. That was the thing about Ethan. He didn't know how to tell the truth unless it benefited him. Sure enough, 2 days later, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened, it was her, the fiancé. Her voice was shaking. "Hi, I don't know who you are, but I think you're his wife." "Ethan's wife? If this is some kind of mistake, please tell me, because I'm sitting here with an engagement ring and no idea what's real anymore." I didn't call her back. Not yet. That wasn't my job. My job was to make sure Ethan couldn't explain this away with one of his charming little smirks. That same week, I turned my attention to his workplace. Ethan worked in sales for a company that did a lot of travel, but here's the thing. I knew for a fact that many of his business trips weren't business at all. Some were with her, some were with other women, some were just excuses to drink and gamble with friends in Vegas. I had receipts, literal receipts. Hotel bills charged to the company card that didn't match his expense reports. Dinner tabs in cities where his company had no offices. I compiled everything into a neat little dossier, anonymous, of course, and sent it to his HR department with subject line, "Misuse of company funds, please investigate." I knew they'd eat that up. Companies love pretending they care about ethics when really they just hate being stolen from. Ethan must have felt the walls closing in because that's when he finally tried to talk to me. He came home early one night, holding takeout like we were some happy couple again. "Can we talk?" he said, setting the food on the counter. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "About what?" He sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "About us. Look, I made mistakes, but the other woman, she meant nothing. It was stupid. I love you. We can work this out." My eyes dropped to his hand. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring, but I'd already seen the box for hers. The engagement ring. The one he bought while still sharing a bed with me. "You bought her a ring, Ethan." He froze, just for a second, but it was enough. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." I cut in. My voice was calm. Too calm. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught." His jaw tightened. "Do you really want to throw away everything we built over one mistake?" "One?" I let out a humorless laugh. "You didn't just cheat. You built an entire second life, and you think I'm throwing it away?" I grabbed my keys. "No, Ethan, you burned it to the ground yourself." While he was busy trying to spin his sob story to me, the rest of his world was crumbling. His fiancée confronted him in public at his favorite restaurant, no less. I didn't see it, but I heard about it from a mutual acquaintance who happened to be there. Apparently, she slapped him, loud enough for people to turn their heads, and then she stormed out, ring still on the table. At work, things weren't much better. The HR department called him in for a serious discussion about his expenses. They had printouts of every questionable charge. Vegas, Miami, Chicago, dinners for two in cities where he was supposedly alone. He tried to claim they were client meetings. They asked for client names. He didn't have them. By the end of that week, Ethan was put on administrative leave pending investigation, which, in corporate speak, is basically, start packing your things. But I wasn't done. I reached out to a divorce lawyer before Ethan could even say the word. I handed over every financial record I had, every joint account, every asset. We mapped out exactly how to split things in a way that protected me and only me. My lawyer was ruthless, exactly what I needed. We froze certain accounts before he could drain them. We put my name first on property filings. We made sure he couldn't touch my savings. And when I told Ethan I'd filed, he looked small, not angry, not defensive, just small. "I don't want this," he said, voice cracking. "We can fix it." "There's nothing to fix," I said. "There's just the truth now. And the truth is, I don't even know who I married." The final blow came on a Tuesday. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from that same mutual acquaintance. "He's out. Lost his job." An hour later, another buzz. "And she's gone. Blocked his number." Ethan had lost everything he'd been juggling, the job that paid for his ego trips, the fiancé who boosted his ego, and the wife who kept his home together. And the best part, I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't need to. If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office signing divorce papers with my head held high and a strange sense of calm, I would have laughed in their face. Back then, I thought marriage was forever. I thought Ethan and I were partners in every sense of the word, that we'd grow old together, bicker about TV shows, argue over thermostat settings, and maybe retire by the beach. Instead, there I was, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly above me, the scent of old carpet and faint coffee lingering in the air. As I scribbled my name on the last page, the pen glided over the paper, the sound oddly final, like a door clicking shut. The settlement was fair. I wasn't out to ruin him financially, no matter how many people told me I should. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted freedom. The house was sold, the assets divided, and I walked away with enough to start over, not rich, but stable. I kept my dignity, and that meant more than any dollar amount. When my lawyer slid the folder toward me, smiling gently, she said, "Congratulations, you're officially free." Free. That word hit different when you've spent years feeling trapped without even realizing it. Walking out of that office, I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't feel the gut-twisting rage I'd carried for months after discovering Ethan's affair. Instead, it was like my chest finally expanded after years of shallow breathing. I thought about the little signs I had ignored. The way he started coming home later, claiming work was crazy. The sudden new cologne I never bought him. The phone flipped face down on the table, always locked. The constant nitpicking about how I looked, dressed, or even laughed. And I remembered the mental gymnastics I put myself through to excuse all of it. I told myself I was overthinking, that I needed to be more understanding, that if I worked harder at being the perfect wife, things would get better. It's strange how manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation when you're inside it. It just feels like trying to keep the peace. Betrayal changes you, not just in the way you trust others, but in the way you see yourself. For a long time, I hated the woman I was during those years, the one who ignored her own instincts, who swallowed her feelings to avoid conflict. But slowly, I realized she was just doing her best with what she knew then. I stopped blaming her and started learning from her mistakes. After the divorce, there was this awkward in-between stage. People don't talk about it much, but freedom can feel a lot like emptiness at first. The house was gone. The routines were gone. Even the fights, as toxic as they were gone. My phone didn't light up with his messages anymore, and for a while, that silence felt deafening. But then, little by little, I started filling that silence with my own life again. I reached out to friends I hadn't spoken to in years because I'd been too busy being Ethan's wife. I got coffee with Claire, who had been my best friend in college until Ethan subtly convinced me she was a bad influence. Spoiler, she wasn't. We picked up right where we left off, laughing so hard in the cafe that the barista gave us side eyes. I visited my parents for the first time in ages without worrying about how Ethan would sulk the entire trip. I reconnected with my cousin Lily, who lived 3 hours away, and we planned a girls' weekend in the mountains. I even traveled solo for the first time in my life, a week in Italy, something I'd always dreamed of, but Ethan had dismissed as too expensive for something so impractical. I wandered through cobblestone streets, ate pasta at tiny family-run restaurants, and sat by the Trevi Fountain at night, feeling completely anonymous and completely alive. One thing I'd shelved for years was my dream of opening a small business. Before I married Ethan, I'd been obsessed with the idea of running a little bookstore cafe, a cozy spot with shelves of paperbacks, good coffee, and a corner for local musicians or poets to perform. Ethan had always laughed at the idea. You know most small businesses fail, right? You're not a business person. Stick to your day job. But post-divorce me, she wasn't asking for permission anymore. I found a small, slightly run-down shop space on a quiet street. It smelled faintly of dust and had uneven floors, but the sunlight poured in through the front windows in the most perfect way. I poured my settlement money and my heart into fixing it up. By spring, the Page Pour was open for business. It wasn't just a store, it became a little community. People came in for coffee and stayed for hours, reading, chatting, or writing in their journals. We hosted poetry nights, book clubs, and even a kids' storytelling hour. Every time I unlocked the door in the morning, I felt a wave of gratitude that this was my life now, that I had built something from scratch for myself. About a year after the divorce, I heard about Ethan by accident. I was standing in the shop, restocking the display table, when Claire came in with a sheepish look. "Okay, I wasn't going to tell you this," she began, "but I saw Ethan on Facebook the other day. He's living in another state now, working some low-paying sales job, small apartment, no mention of her, by the way." I didn't ask for more. It was weird. I thought maybe I'd feel vindicated. Like, karma got him, but I didn't. I didn't feel joy or pity, just nothing. And that's when I realized I was really free. Because his life, his choices, his consequences, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. One rainy evening, after closing the shop, I sat at one of the cafe tables with my laptop. The rain tapped gently against the windows and the smell of coffee still lingered in the air. I opened Reddit and started typing, not to trash Ethan, not to brag about how well I'd bounced back, but because I knew there were other people out there, sitting in their own version of the life I used to live, doubting themselves, making excuses for someone else's bad behavior. I wrote, "If your gut tells you something's wrong, listen to it. The truth may hurt, but living in a lie hurts far worse." I ignored my instincts for years, thinking love meant loyalty at all costs. But loyalty without respect is just self-betrayal. I thought I'd never survive the heartbreak, but I did, and I built a better life on the other side. You can too. I hit post and closed the laptop. As I turned off the lights and stepped out into the rain, locking the door behind me, I thought about that word again. Free. This time, it didn't feel like an escape from something bad. It felt like walking towards something good. And I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the first chapter of the life I chose.